Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program. If you are a new listener, this is a show, a weekly program where we talk about news, politics, and what's going on in the world. Now, this episode comes on the back of a very somber event in Charlottesville. We're going to be spending most of the hour talking about that in particular. And also want to apologize for being slightly late. Just personal note, there is a lot of very rapid organizing afoot here in the city of Kalamazoo, and I have been knee-deep into that. So I'm joined today by both Luke and Lawrence.
What up, everybody?
What up, everybody?
And I guess before I start, and this is just a quick note. So, Lawrence, when are you? Just double checking. Are you going to be here? Is there a certain time you got to be busting out of here?
Usually around 6:15.
6. Okay.
6:15.
I'm going to speak later in the hour about kind of Charleston through the frame of my experience as a frontline activist. But, of course, I want to give the floor to my comrades here while we got them. So there's a lot to unpack from this. And, you know, I guess, like, what we can really start with before we dig into the specific issues is just... you know, temperature check. You know, what is the significance of this event, you guys, and like, particularly in the context of it being, you know, we had, you know, rest in power, Heather Heyer. You know, that's some heavy stuff, and not to say that there hasn't been a great degree of violence toward activists in the American scene. I mean, you can just look at Standing Rock. You can just look at Black Lives Matter. You can just look at the issues, you know, involving, you know, immigrants and black people and indigenous people and other oppressed minorities. And while, you know, it's certainly understandable, like, this is nothing new. This sort of, like, murder coming out of hate. But in a very real sense, the resistance...
You mean literal, actual terrorist attack?
A literal, actual terrorist attack directed towards, and I was speaking about this a little bit in a Facebook post I made days after, in whatever it is that we call the resistance, and I'm not talking about, you know, quote-unquote, the resistance trademark.
The hashtag resistance.
Yeah, I'm talking about, like, the real one that's a broad coalition of people all the way from radical anarchist AntiFur to maybe establishment or people who work in institutional politics. Maybe they even work for Hillary Clinton, but they're beginning to unpack the systemic interlinks towards, you know, why we are in the mess that we're currently in. And in that sense, this is when the resistance got real.
Let me just chime in for a second. It's something that you said. This is kind of par for the course if you understand American history. You had a group of angry white men with torches marching to a church where you had people like Dr. Cornel West were at, and other anti-fascists and anti-bigotry protesters. You know, actual
not just protesters. Clergy members
standing in solidarity with unity, freedom, and justice for all against those who were fighting for the opposite of those values, opposite of American values. It's normal if you understand that this history and not just American history, but just history around the world, when you have, you know, white nationalists like this rising up. One of my favorite political commentators said that the brown shirts are here. That the brown shirts are here. And when you have people who are screaming about their rights while they're rocking the Confederate flag or the swastika, and they are literally representing and acting like people who are traitors to our country or people that we fought or ideology that we fought against. It only shows you how far we still have to go, because those people, remind you, those people were encouraged when our current president, Dr. Mr. Orange McGee said, if you see a protester, knock the crap out of them. Or if do you remember back in the day, if they came to a rally like this, they'll leave in a stretcher. These are things that he said, and even during his rallies when he was advocate of trying to become president, you had violence. So this is not something that was this level of violence was only the next step after you've seen black people and other protesters being punched in the face, being pushed around, people getting spitted on. This next escalation was going to happen. Vice did a video that I posted on my Facebook page of one of the main members of the white supremacist groups, and he said that he was coming to the protest. He had guns on him, and he said that there's going to be more deaths to come when they do their next rally, and he was looking forward to it. He was basically acting like the leader in War Planet of the Apes, whatchamacallit's character, Woody Harrelson's character.
Oh yeah.
That's how he was acting and sounding, and it's scary because these are the kind of people that we would think, like we would think, yes, we want to have a free market of ideas. Let's have a debate. Let's talk about how we can fix these solutions. These people don't want to talk. They want to be violent, and they're choosing to start said violence. And when you have a president that basically is saying that both sides are being violent, both sides are doing it, and he's basically giving them the okay, that is the brown shirts being the brown shirts.
Yeah, I mean, let's not forget, Hitler had very similar rhetoric when he was in power. He would publicly denounce these acts, but he would still keep up with like the racist rhetoric and language, and well, we all know what that snowballed into.
Yeah, I just number one, thank you for bringing up that Vice video, because I was going to bring that up if you did not. Number one, you say he acts like Woody Harrelson's character in War for the Planet of the Apes. I say he acts like a terrorist, like the head of a terrorist cell.
Yeah, a terrorist by any other name.
He's
a terrorist by.
He's like in the video, he's essentially promising that he thinks more people will die, and if he thinks more people will die, I do not believe that is because of an indictment of violence from the left to the right. I honestly, truly believe that he means more people will die because of incitement of violence from the right to the left.
In that video, he's pulling out 5 guns. He has 3 handguns and an assault rifle, and then he has a AR-15 laying on the bed.
Yeah, that's important to point out, because in this false equivalency, did the AntiFur engage violently with some of the Nazis? Yes, but they had sticks, they had clubs, they had shields. A lot of these alt-right Nazi folks came with semi-automatic weapons,
bearing the fruits of their Second Amendment rights. I mean, not only that he viewed this man in the Vice video. I'm gonna have to freaking find it, and we're gonna have to link it. He believes that more death will happen. Now, honestly, I can honestly tell you that I don't know where that death will happen, but I do know that as long as ideologies that have hate and oppression built into the cornerstones of what they believe, we're not going to see it's not going to be violent because of the people they want to oppress. We're talking about inherently violent ideologies and inherently oppressive ideologies when we're talking about white supremacy. But more running back to my point that he sounds like the leader of a terrorist cell. There is a bit in there's a portion of the video when the Unite the Right march ran into Antifa protesters on the way towards the statue of Robert E. Lee. That's where the violence began to break out. It's when that was the cause of the state of emergency being called. That was what caused the entire protest and the entire gathering to be canceled outright at all. However, in the video, we hear that there is a group of white supremacists and Nazis caught in the middle of Antifa protesters, and that the police cannot get them out safely, or at least not safely as fast as the organization, as the Unite the Right Front would like them to be. The person on camera during this scene, during these events, says into the cell phone to the police officer that he is talking to that if they don't get their people out of there ASAP, he's going to send 300 men with semi-automatic rifles down to the square to get them for them. And my question is, how is that not a terrorist threat?
Well, it's just they have opinions, Luke, and we have to respect them. No.
300 armed men is more than enough to constitute a domestic threat on any scale. That's a terrorist threat.
Let's let Lawrence jump in.
Just to interject for a second. Imagine if that was the Black Panthers. Yeah. Imagine if that was Black Lives Matter and the Black Panthers said, if you do not get our peaceful protesters out of there safely, we're going to send 300 men with rifles. Imagine if that was an Islamic march and they said, we're going to bring 300 men with guns to get them safely. Not only would that be covered by Fox News and every news station around the country, they would not only would that have happened, they would have called in a National Guard to separate, to escalate things, to separate things. But here's the thing, this is the other part that I want to get at, and this was also in the video. The mayor of that town of Charlottesville knew that it was coming. They knew this march was coming. They knew what to plan for. Yet they did not. They told the police department, as far as my knowledge, to stand down. They basically told them not to engage them in the same way that they engaged Black Lives Matter protesters. Or in my eyes, the mayor and the police chief, they've had rallies in this town before. They've had white supremacist KKK rallies before. They know how these things operate. Why were you not better protected beforehand? Why didn't you have barriers protecting the protesters and the counter protesters? Why wasn't there? Why didn't you bring out the National Guard or other things like that, like they did in Ferguson or in Baltimore? They chose to. They knew that this was coming beforehand, and they chose to operate as if it was standard procedure. They chose to not prepare properly enough for what was going to come. and 2 officers died, and a young female activist died because of it. And that is the thing that bothers me the most. The video that Dr. Cornel West did on Democracy Now! And the video that Lee Camp did from Redacted Tonight, because they were both there. Lee Camp was a foot away from the person that drove the car into the crowd. And Dr. Cornel West was at the church that was surrounded by alt-right activists, alt-right terrorists.
Do you want me to play that clip real quick?
Yes, please.
Oh, okay. Hold on. But yeah, what he says is very, very important, and it's really a side that had. Well, we'll talk about it after I play the clip. But yeah, here is Cornel West talking about some of his experiences in Charlottesville.
You had a number of the courageous students of all colors at the University of Virginia who were protesting against the neo-fascists themselves. The neo-fascists had their own ammunition, and this is very important to keep in mind because the police, for the most part, pulled back. The next day, for example, although the 20 of us who were standing, many of them clergy, we would have been crushed like cockroaches if it were not for the anarchists and the anti-fascists who approached over 350 anti-fascists. We just had 20, and we singing This Little Light of Mine. You know what I mean? So that
Antifa meaning anti-fascist.
The anti-fascists and the crucial role of the anarchists, because they saved our lives. Actually, we would have been completely crushed, and I'll never forget that. Meaning what? Meaning that you had the police holding back on the one hand, so we couldn't even get arrested. We were there to get arrested. We couldn't get arrested because the police had pulled back and just allowing fellow citizens to go at each other. You see. And with all of the consequences that would follow therefrom. So in that sense, you know, I think what we're really seeing, though, Sister Amy, is the American empire in decay with the rule of big money, with massive militarism, facilitated by the scapegoating of the most vulnerable of immigrants, Muslims, Jews, Arabs, gay, lesbians, trans, and bisexuals and black folk. The white supremacy was so intense. I'd never seen that kind of hatred in my life. We stood there and 9 units went by and looking right in our eyes, and they cussing me out and so forth and so on. And they lucky I didn't lose my Holy Ghost, to tell you the truth, because I wanted to start swinging myself. I'm a Christian but not a pacifist, you know. But I held back. But that kind of hatred, but that is just the theater. It's big money, it's big military, and the way in which this capitalist civilization is leading us toward unbelievable darkness and bleakness. And the beautiful thing is to fight back. It was a beautiful thing to see all the people coming back, but they had more fascists than anarchists.
All right, so let's really like dive into the first part of that, so Cornel West is talking about the fact that you had these police there who were essentially doing nothing, and this is what a lot of people on the ground, this is what most of the people on the ground reported too, that the police just kind of stepped back, allowed the violence to happen between the Nazis and the Antifa, and in many situations, because keep in mind, like, this is all of these the demonstrations in Charlottesville was a very diverse coalition. You had like clergy like Dr. Cornel West, and you had peaceful protesters like people from like the DSA, a lot of very progressive groups, and then you had the Antifa as essentially the line of defense that our state-sanctioned police forces were abdicating their duty to perform.
Yeah, really, truly, if we want to indict any group truly for the violence that occurred, if we're going to talk about blame on all sides, we need to honestly take a hard look at what the state did in the situation, and the state pulled back. The state was not the impartial third party to these two groups' difference of opinions on their speech. Like, we're talking about tacit acceptance of from the state of the violence that was going to occur, because Nazi ideology and white supremacist ideology are inherently violent ideologies. And when you are one of those groups faced with a just as energetic and just as gathered and just as organized, diverse group of counter-protesters, sparks are going to fly, emotions are going to fire, somebody's getting punched. Without an impartial third-party arbitrator, that results in violence. The state didn't do its job. Like, 100%, the state didn't do its job.
And also, as a result, people like DeAndre Harris was one of the people who got brutalized by white supremacists and by neo-Nazis. He got his head split open. You had
lots of cuts and abrasions. Yeah, it's pretty gruesome.
And I'm saying, one side had guns. Now I understand. Now, do not get me wrong. I understand that the police have a difficult job. I understand that the mayor had a tough choice to make. I get that. I feel that. But within the same token, if you're going to crack the heads of peaceful protesters in Standing Rock, if you're going to bring out H2s and have riot gear at peaceful protesters for Baltimore and in Chicago and at Black Lives Matter rallies, you're telling me that you can prepare for a Klan rally or alt-right rally, which you have done before? You have done this job before. You have seen how this event plays out before. And you're telling me that you couldn't do your job now? The thing, what infuriates me, besides that, is look at the framing. He was at a church with other pastors, with other religions, with Muslim people, with Jewish people, and they were having a sermon at a black church in the South. And angry white men with torches was going to a black church in the South that was near a Confederate monument.
Yeah, it sounds familiar.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. How does that play out in American history? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
How has that played out in any other circumstance in American history? And you're telling me, as a police chief, as a mayor, you're going to fail your city. You have failed your city on some Green Lantern.
Dun, 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 dun. It was Green Arrow.
Green Arrow.
They should make a show about Green Lantern.
Right.
Yeah, get around to it, CW.
But and the other thing that he's talking about, this is something that Nomiki Kantz, who's an investigative reporter, also talked about as well. And this is something that the Washington Post talked about when he talks about big money, that income inequality in America. New York Times. There's that article I want to talk about, but that'll be for another time because that infuriated me. But when you have disenfranchised people and they're looking for a reason why they're being disenfranchised, and the powerful tell you it's these other people and they believe it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They are given a scapegoat and they run with it, then those things will happen. The things that we see will happen. It's not like we haven't seen this story play out in history before.
Yeah, I mean, it's not to make a pun out of it, but I mean, race has always been the trump card of this nation's power structure. And you know, this really did make me not necessarily reevaluate it, but hone in on, we talk a lot about systemic issues on this program, and we talked about this before, but it's the rotten fruit at the core of white colonialism. And, that's where these double standards come from. This idea that, these militant, hateful Nazis can protest with rifles and not be bothered by the police. Yet, here's a really good example that I like to use. So let's compare and contrast Standing Rock with, last year, the Bundys and a bunch of their allies went and took over what was like a bird sanctuary. But it was for similar...
Federal Reserve.
Yeah, it was Federal Reserve. But it was not completely, analogous, but similar reasons. It was because encroachment of their territory by a state entity, and I'll consider the Dakota Access Pipeline part of the state, although it's kind of a fusion of the state and, it's the corporate state, really. But so anyway, similar reasons. The Bundys, were abrasive. They were armed. They were much more aggressive in their language. And you had police out there.
They threatened to kill cops.
Yeah, they threatened to kill cops.
Yeah.
And the police would just talk them down. Da-da-da. And, as someone who was at Standing Rock, I hoses, tear gas. I smelled some tear gas myself. And I'll tell you one thing. When the veterans were coming for the Veterans March in the very cold North Dakota winter, they originally were going to come armed with their weapons in their fatigues and all that, actual defense of Acheti-Sakowin, which was the main camp. And the elders told them not to do that, specifically because the state police apparatus, Tiger Swan, and the police of North Dakota and everyone else they brought in, they were looking for any excuse to just mow the camp down. And I mean that in the clear, specific terms. We would be sitting around just... we would worry about infiltrators coming into the camp with firearms, because that would be the excuse that they could use to just bulldoze, pave us over, and possibly even use live weapons. And that double standard was so starkly seen at Charlottesville. And we must remember that Trump exacerbated this. It got them to come out of the shadows. It got them to, march without their masks. But this is part of a systemic problem that has existed since the beginning of this country, which is we operate around this white colonialist framework where you are prized if you are a rich white man, and if you are poor and white, they will convince you that you have this innate superiority over poor people of color so that you do not join them and raise a ruckus.
Just to piggyback off of the whole double standard of treatment in protest by our law enforcement, there is a clip floating around Facebook. People may have seen it. I don't know, but it is a video of members of the Unite the Right Front pushing against pushing against a riot line of police when police did finally step in, and during the state of emergency, they were pushing against the riot line's shield wall, and the cops just kind of pushed back. They didn't react. There wasn't reaction. People weren't being pulled through the shield wall to be subjugated, to be arrested and restrained. I'm sure that it happened a couple times with a few people, but not in any kind of the same severity that it would have been if it was a group of black people pushing up against a police riot line's shield wall. Mostly because I don't think that riot line would have ever let that many black protesters get that close to them.
No.
So,
and just one more thing about double standards. Republicans like to say Muslims need to, non-extremist Muslims need to object to all extremists. It's their responsibility. When will the Christian and non-complacent white people in America do something about the alt-right and KKK in this country? If we want to talk about the double standard, and we talk about in America, let's talk about how if a Muslim person killed people with a car in Europe, the Muslim terrorists mowed down people in a truck, and all Muslim people need to say that they object to this. Where are the Republicans? Where are those Christians that are going to reject these supremacists? Oh, I mean, the other part of that is also as well. You talk about double standards. You want to talk about snowflakes? These people came to this march and talk about identity politics. These are Republican talking points. You had a march that said this is for uniting white supremacy, or this is about white supremacy, and then you are marching because a Confederate monument is maybe taken down, and you're for free speech, but not for the counter protesters to be there to have that free speech. And when they start using their free speech, you hit them with a car.
Yeah.
I want to make a point about nice white people coming out and speaking out against Nazism, especially in the face of the comments our president has given in this situation. Comments like, well, there are good and bad people on both sides. On many sides. Well, there's some good people on that side, there are some good people on the other side, and there are bad people on that side, and there are bad people on this side, and there's enough blame to go around. It's not enough to just denounce Nazis. It's not enough to just denounce Nazis. In this case, like, if you have issues with Antifa tactics, you know what? That's completely understandable. It is their tactics are a double-edged blade that is unfortunately necessary when we're talking about dealing with violent ideologies. In this case, there is no many sides. There are no many sides. There are two sides. There's the side with Nazis on it, and there's the side with not Nazis on it. Yeah, the not Nazis contain the Antifa. And yeah, the Antifa can be violent in their practice. But you want to know what Antifa aren't? Nazis.
Wait.
So if you so
Right in the name.
It's right there. So really, like, if you can find the space in this situation with this most current incident to say, yes, Nazis are bad, but you're supporting Nazis. You are tacitly supporting Nazis by treating their opposition as inherently equal. That is, it's not just a false equivalence, because Antifa hasn't resulted in a genocidal regime. Not just because of that. It's also an example of neutrality bias, which says, well, here's one side and here's the other. Who's right? I don't know. Who's right? Maybe not the Nazis? I thought we had this discussion 80 years ago, but I mean...
Oh, wait. And also, just one other thing, because I've seen this on Facebook too. People say that the Confederate flag is being misused, or the Confederacy is being misused or misunderstood. As the only black person in this room, I will let me address this clearly. The cornerstone of the Confederacy stands on the belief that the Negro was inferior to the white man. This ideology, they believed it so hard that they started a war and they lost. And now their numbers have dwindled and their ideology sucks so bad that they had to join up with Nazis.
Yeah.
So no. So when I hear people say, or they inflate other protests, other American protests, to being as bad as the Nazi protests. These are not equal. And Dr. Cornell West was talking about it, that there are multiple issues that have led to this moment. Big money is one of them. How our military industrial complex is another, but also how our media is covering it. A majority of the media, when in the first few days of the stories breaking, was not willing to call white supremacy terrorists as they are.
Some weren't even willing to say white supremacists. I kept saying white nationalists.
Yes, white
nationalist activists.
Yes, yes. Okay, a white nationalist is a white supremacist. They are one and the same. Call it as Trump says. Call it. You have to call it what it is. Yeah. You have to call it what it is.
I mean, PC culture is just ruining America, man. Like, just call a spade, right?
Oh man.
I mean, you have to call it what it is. We have to call it what it is. So when you have a bunch of angry white men with torches walking down the street trying to hurt other people, what is that? When they're threatening to use guns on Americans, innocent civilians, and these people are the biggest snowflakes because they cannot debate in the free market of ideas. They cannot articulate their stance because their stance is unjustifiable. They have a right, and to be clear, they have a right to want to support the Confederacy, even though they lost to America. They can have a right to be Nazis if they want, even though they lost to America. They can fetishize losers who've lost to America's power and ideology. That's all fine and dandy. What you don't have a right to be is liked. You don't have you don't have a right to not be criticized. And if you cannot take criticism, even though you're supposed to be debating, then you are that snowflake that you hate against.
So I wanted to, Luke, you mentioned kind of the nice white liberal archetype, and
yes, I did.
Particularly Lawrence, while you're still here, I actually had somebody ask about the radio show. If we would talk about what can white people do better to deal with this issue, and Shannon Sykes, she dropped some potent truth bombs at the local solidarity rally we had. Basically, it's white people, you are not doing enough. You are not communicating with other white people about why this is wrong. And Nathan Dannison also said something to that effect. But I'll definitely want all of us to chime in on this. But I don't know, Lawrence, would you like to kind of start with that? And
as a comedian once said, the liberal redneck once said, complicity is your complacency, or in that sense. If you are, I think it was Nelson Mandela that said that, he was referencing Nelson Mandela. If you are complacent in my oppression, you are complicit in it happening. So, in speaking out, I know it's going to get uncomfortable. You're going to have a lot of uncomfortable conversations with some of your family members who may think that running over protesters is a good thing. And also, just to speak on that one quick thing, there are state legislators, like in North Dakota and in other places, that was trying to pass legislation that it was okay for people to run over protesters. That is not okay. Murder is never okay. If you cannot handle... okay. Protests are not supposed to be convenient. If you're okay with the protest going on, that is not a protest, that is a parade.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So...
I think a lot of our pink hat brothers and sisters could learn a lesson from that.
Right. So, for my Caucasian brothers and sisters, you're going to have some of those very uncomfortable conversations, and you're going to have to come to some really ugly truths. When your other white brothers and sisters are saying that the Confederacy was not about slavery, read the cornerstone of the Confederacy to them. Read the first paragraph to them, and then ask them why the Confederacy is not a bunch of racist bigots. Ask them why in most countries, in most European countries, the swastika is illegal. So what a lot of skinheads will do, and neo-Nazis will do, will adopt the Confederate flag as their flag. It is such a racist symbol. It is the backup racist symbol for another racist symbol. So you're going to have that conversation with people. You're going to have to tell them that's not okay. And ask them, if this was happening to you, would that be okay? If a Black Lives Matter activist ran you over with a car, would you be okay with that? Or ran over your people with a car, would you be okay with that? No, you're not. Oh, you said no, you're not okay with it. Okay, if you're not okay with it happening to you, why are you okay with it happening to other people? You're going to have those type of conversations with people. I know it's going to be difficult, it's uncomfortable, but those type of conversations you're going to have and make them public. Put those people on blast. There's a thing on Twitter now where they're putting a lot of the protesters on blast for being who they are. If they want to be white supremacists and neo-Nazis and Confederate lovers, that's great. You don't have your hoods on anymore, so we can see your faces. So put these people on blast.
I mean, to the statement, you don't have your hoods on anymore. I mean, a lot of these guys, and Andy and I have talked about this before too, about the the kind of evolution of the radical left and radical right from the internet, specifically sites like Something Awful and 4chan. Mm-hmm. Guys, you're not posting your racist views on B anymore. You're posting them on Facebook. Your tag isn't Anon. Your tag is your name.
Yeah.
Like, if you feel comfortable posting racist garbage with your name attached to it, then honestly, like, what did you expect? Did you expect tolerance? No? Weird. Anyway, to also kind of throw back to Caucasian, dude, just call us white. Dude, I'm not Caucasian. I'm white.
You're white.
I'm not from the Caucasus. Caucasians aren't a real thing. There's an Adam Ruins Everything episode about it. Go look it up.
I will have to look it up.
Like I'm not German. I'm not German enough to be German. I'm not Swedish enough to be a Swede. I'm not Finnish enough to be a Finn. I'm not Scottish enough to be Scottish. I'm an American mutt. I'm white. and other white people, like, dude, when people call you white, you can't get your frills up in it. Like, you're white. You're white. Yeah. If we're gonna tag, like, if part of the American cultural identity is the cultural identity that black people have managed to form for themselves out of essentially nothing, because they've had their history and their culture stripped and washed away by the institution of slavery. Like, if we're going to call them black, they get to call us white. And that's not a bad thing. Honestly, it's not. It's not a bad thing, because it's not. It's not a bad thing, especially if you know who you are and you have portions of the cultures that you know, that you descend from, that you celebrate. Like, that's fine. Like, it's being called white is an offensive term. So, in the terms of white people, how can you help? As a white people, you talk to more not white people. And when I say talk, I mean ask questions and then shut up and listen.
Yeah, listen. Don't be. Yeah, I was talking to someone about, like, don't come in with, like, a white savior complex, or
take a note, like, write some questions down, take a notebook, ask your questions, take notes, say thank you. Like, that's it. That's it. And then do better. Right. But I mean, at that point, if I'm gonna make you take notes, I'm gonna test you, and that's what you have to do. That's what the black communities and POC community expectations of white people are every day, because they freaking talk about it all the time. They explain themselves to white people all the time, and white people continuously fail to test out of basic not racism. And honestly, like I got a Saraha like last week.
Oh man.
That gave me props for being woke, even though I'm a white male, and I'm just like, thanks for the cookie, but it's one of those things. Like, when you listen, you have to internalize the information you just got. You have to actually go through the process of critical thinking to understand a viewpoint that you absolutely had, that white people have absolutely no bearing in really experiencing because they are white. You have to practice good critical thinking skills in order to do better when you listen to people of color.
I think a lot of that also comes with just empathy. Put yourself in that other person's shoes and see how you would feel in that situation.
Empathy's not really, or in my eyes, as a white person being critical of white people, empathy is not, in my eyes, a factor. Because all you have to do right now is ask a white person, any random white person on the street, hey, if you were black tomorrow, would you be okay with your life? Would you be okay with the consequences of that? And the answer is usually no. So white people know, but they don't want to address it.
But
that also goes to my point. It's after you understand. That's why I said you have to do better. I mean, if I'm in a situation and, okay, for example, I was explaining the Confederacy to a friend of mine, how she tried to tell me that it was not just about it was about states' rights. And I had to ask her, yeah, okay, you want to say that? It's about states' rights to do what?
To do what they want. But what do they want to do?
Exactly. Like complete. You're almost there. You're almost there. Complete that thought. Just go get over the hurdle. Get over. You know what I'm saying? But another thing besides, just it goes back to the go back into history. The civil rights movement was also connected to the poor people's movement, and also understanding that we are all in that same boat. The fact that half of the country makes less than $30,000 a year, the fact that we don't have universal health care, the fact that these alt-right people are just poor and disenfranchised as everyone else, but they are blaming the wrong people and looking to find the solutions that's going to help everyone and not just yourself. Mm-hmm. That is how we are going to fix the systemic problem. When you have to understand that not only are we in the same boat, we are going to sink or swim together, but learning how to cooperate with each other. That is how we are going to fix those problems. Is not enough to just say, I see your point, I see your pain, I'm gonna go watch YouTube videos now. Like, you know what I'm saying? No, you have to actively be involved and be on that right side of history. You don't want to be on the wrong side of history. You don't want to show up to the parade late. Stop showing up to the parade late. That's the main part.
My bad. I haven't shown up to any of the parades yet. So. I'm not brave enough to be frontline.
No, I'm not saying that you need to be frontline, but Martin Luther King said it best. The biggest problem when it comes to equality is not the outright racism, not the outright racist or the police officer that is afraid of us. It's the complacent white person who says that I agree with your policy but not your methods. I want to help you, but it's not the right time. That is the biggest problem.
And that is particularly dangerous nowadays, because when you get pushback from not all white institutions, but primarily white institutions like, say like the ACLU, a lot of like establishment Democrats who are critical to the point of, we're talking about this in the right over, like the term alt-left. Like there's like this false equivalency that people who want progressive values and human rights are somehow just as radical as Nazis. And in a time where we are literally, like, these are the conditions in which, like, I feel like we have some easy bake oven instructions how to make a fascist state. We've got all of the ingredients. They're cooking right now. And we can either let it finish or kick over the pot. And telling, like, left people to be nicer or more understanding is just going to let it cook.
Yeah. It's, to go quickly back to, I want to help, but it's not the right time. The right time to plant a tree was 10 years ago. The next best time is today.
Right.
The best time to have started to help advocate for equality causes and causes for justice was 10, 20, 40, 50 years ago. The next best time is right now. Mm-hmm. So if you're asking, if you are asking yourself, like, I don't have the time to commit to demonstration or organizing, if I don't have the time to commit to going on trips to help be a part of national organization, the best thing you can do is to take up space in white spaces, because like people will talk about white people taking up space in black spaces and Latino spaces and gay spaces all the time. Your job is to take up space in white spaces and advocate for those other spaces.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And to stop and honestly, and if you advocate, like, and the way I see it, if white people are advocating for black, Latino, gay, like transsexual minority spaces to a white space, then inclusivity is the logical conclusion to that. Mm-hmm. And that's when there are no quote unquote spaces or safe spaces that people sit in, when like the logical conclusion to an inclusivist ideology is that everybody works together.
To add to that, one of my favorite writers, Ta-Nehisi Coates, when he was at Western, said one of my favorite lines: "The boot of white supremacy does not just stand on the neck of minorities alone; it will be coming for you next." Mm-hmm. So, right. If you do not think, I mean, look at what they were saying when they were down there this past weekend. They were yelling anti-Semitic stuff. They were yelling anti-LGBT stuff. They were definitely yelling racial stuff towards black people and immigrants. They will come for you as well if you do not help us fight back now. And we've seen in America time and time again, when poor people rise up together and we're fighting for a cause that benefits us all, we will succeed. And when we succeed, we will all reap the benefits of said mission. So if it's raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour, fighting for universal health care, decriminalizing, ending the drug war, demilitarizing the police. I mean, if you want to talk about the systemic issues, we've talked about unarmed black people getting shot all the time. A white woman just got shot in Wisconsin by a black cop. Mm-hmm. Yep. It will come for you next. A white woman just got ran over by a neo-Nazi.
That's a perfect example, because that's like I said, like our policing comes out of these kind of white colonial patriarchal structures, but they don't exist strictly as like overtly racist practices, but the systemic consequences that occur from these. Like, I mean, what happened with Justine Diamond was the result of an American police force that is trained to think of their job as more like a soldier in a war zone than a peacekeeper. And that, again, is, that ties back into the war on drugs. And the initial reason we have law enforcement in this country in the first place was basically like a runaway slave brigade. A lot of people don't know that. Like, there weren't like major police forces in this country except for that reason. And that's where modern law enforcement really grew out from.
But that goes to the next point. Like, it will eventually, that these problems are not going to just stay in the black community. These problems have not just stayed in the LGBT community. These problems of white supremacy in our country does not stay in one community. It goes everywhere. If we're talking about the concentration camps, not the concentration, the internment camps of Japanese people, to what they've been doing to the indigenous people of this country since they got here. If we're talking about how they treated Asian Americans ever since they was building the railroads, from all the way then to now, from the private prison industry to the injustice that we see on a daily basis when it comes to our environment and housing for our people, our American people. Since we are all Americans and we're all supposed to have this perfect union, quote unquote, then we have to act like it. We have to fight for it, like we're trying to get there. And if we're fighting for these issues that the alt left, quote unquote, want, right? We have to talk about that term, but I have to go.
Yeah.
Well, we have to talk about that term.
Okay, well, thanks for coming, Lawrence, and helping to drop some truth bombs about what's going on in Charlottesville. I think we're gonna take a little break. We're gonna continue the discussion after that. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo. Keep your eye locked. Your only source for political revolution.
Be apparent, but hunger is a rather prominent issue amongst the student body of Western. The Invisible Need Project is a multifaceted initiative that's aimed to help struggling students. Every 2 weeks, generous people donate their food to the pantry located in the Fawn Student Service buildings or other drop-off locations. All you need to do is grab a reusable bag and grab whatever food you need to help sustain yourself. If anyone's unsure when their next meal will be, or if you have a little extra food you'd be willing to donate, the food pantry is your place. If you're looking to help donate, become a volunteer, or just learn more, call 269-387-4742 or email dosa-inp@wmich.edu for details.
Hey everybody, we're back. If you're just joining us, this is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo. Now I wanted to expand on something. We talked a little bit about like internet culture and all that before that, and that has a very unique position in what's going on with Nazi fanaticism right now. I wanted to play a clip from Kalamazoo had a solidarity rally in Bronson Park on Sunday, and there were a lot of brilliant speakers. Again, I really wish I'd been able to record Shannon Sykes' speech. She's one of the city commissioners and just a bad MF, if I may say so. But Nathan Dannison, he's a local pastor and activist. He had some really incredible and insightful things to say about how to kind of prevent and hinder white radicalism. So I'm going to go ahead and play his speech real quick.
Specific requests that I'd like to make on this beautiful Sunday afternoon. In my church, we always say Happy Sunday. So can y'all say Happy Sunday? Happy Sunday! Never forget that Sunday is a time for rest, recuperation, coming together, and joining our voices together and working together. Are there any church folk out there? Any church people? Yeah. We got a lot of churches in this town. We've got a lot of clergy in this town. I want to make a specific request of the church folk that are here today. I hope and I pray that you heard your pastor, your leader, naming white supremacy as a sin against God Almighty from the pulpit. If you are part of a faith community, if you have been given the privilege of proclamation, then it's time for us to call to bear upon this country and declare that racism, white supremacy, and fascism are sins against God and God's creation. And if your pastor lacks either the courage or the stamina to bring this up, please schedule a time to talk with them on Monday morning in their office. I know they want to hear from you, and if they don't want to talk to you, you can give them my phone number. Jesus Christ was hung on a Roman cross by a fascist government. The fascist government of Rome is the government after which every fascist government has modeled itself. And as Christians, we've got to remember that. The second request I have is out there, that if you know a young man, a young person who is 13, 14, 15, 16 years old, I want you to think about them right now. I want you to think about that young teenager, especially if they are male, especially if they are white, especially if they are male and white and isolated, because there are vipers out there who are recruiting our young men into fascist movements. They are using chat rooms and video games. They are using the internet. They are using YouTube channels to radicalize our young men. And when they're 13, 14, 15 years old, it starts out as a fun game. When they're 18, 19, 20 years old, they are practicing fascists.
That's right.
That is happening right now.
Yep.
If you know a young person, get in the way of that system. Break that system. Introduce them to community. Do not let them wither in the darkness. Do not let their only contacts with adults be strangers on the internet who have political motivations. The last request that I have is to all of you who are out there working in anti-fascist direct action. The mantle of our democracy rests upon your shoulders. We are with you. We support you. If you are an anti-fascist organizer, if you are an anti-fascist protester, we know that you did not go to Charlottesville because you wanted to, but because the demands of patriotism meant that you had to put your body on the line for the safety of our democracy. We stand with you. In closing, I want to say to all of you who are thinking about joining this anti-fascist movement, we need you, we need you, we need you. The road to fascism begins with marches and rallies, and it ends in the ovens of Auschwitz. We have forgotten that. We need to be reminded of that today. So please stand up, be counted. Put your bodies on the line. Put your privilege to work in your community. We've got to say to these people, in the words of the sainted Woody Guthrie, all you fascists are bound to lose. You're bound to lose. You fascists are bound to lose.
So I just wanted to touch on the later part of what Nathan said, and Nathan, I'm going to embarrass you a little bit, and I'm probably going to put this on your Facebook page and do a time code. As somebody who's been a frontline activist, I actually teared up when he started talking about that, because it's not not that like I don't really go around, and I'd say most people like this don't go around and say, hey, I was at Standing Rock, most people, it's not very comfortable to talk to, and honestly, Charlottesville was a very triggering experience, and I saw this with lots of people who have been part of those frontline demonstrations, be it Standing Rock, the inauguration, generally anything where there's like some sort of like violence or trauma as a part of it. So to get that shout out specifically, during that rally, it meant a lot to me as somebody who's been out there on the front lines. So thank you so much, Nathan Dennison. Much love. Let's kind of talk about what was earlier, and one of the biggest reasons I played that clip. He talked about like the recruitment of frustrated young white men into these neo-fascist circles, and like both me and Luke are into nerd culture, and we actually had conversations about how interesting it is that 4chan was the incubator of not only Anonymous, but also this current seething alt-right movement, which is basically like Nazism with memes.
Yeah, all you have to do to really kind of even just scratch the surface and get an idea is to go to to go to the 4chan website and look at their political board, or poll as it is, poll as it is abbreviated there.
Don't go on a full stomach though.
Don't go on a full stomach and turn your incognito on, because it's a pile of flaming hot garbage. Yeah. Like, I mean, the internet is. It doesn't surprise me that the internet is a tool to radicalize young men.
It's really not too dissimilar to the way ISIS does it.
Especially young white men who have more than enough time to idle about and faff off on the internet, doing whatever, lurking, posting, making low effort memes, doing whatever. But that ability to spend that much time allows these groups that see these places as a safe space for them to spout their ideology. It allows them to spend time with these people and expose them to their viewpoints and talk them over to their side. Which, I don't really know where I'm going with it. It's just kind of like, bruh.
Well, something that I'm just reminded of, I was listening to this, might have been Democracy Now!, I'm not sure, but they were talking about Steve Bannon, and the fact he used to own a company what they did is they would farm like gold and expansions and viable objects for massively multiplayer online games.
Oh, so he ran a gold farm.
Yeah, gold farming. Yeah, and what happened is his company was literally destroyed by players on the internet, predominantly like a lot of white dudes. No offense, but demographically, it's a big chunk of who plays this kind of game. And they essentially used their leverage, their skills, and spread this campaign radically fast to have Steve Bannon's company taken down. And they did. And it was the commentator was talking about the situation. He was like an unofficial biographer of Steve Bannon. Talked about how like that was a really kind of eureka moment for Steve Bannon to realize like these like isolated young people playing these games, if you could harness them as a political force, could be very powerful. And that's frightening, too, to understand that, like, you know, there are people literally in the White House who understand the power of radicalizing, you know, these young...
Using the internet as a tool for radical propaganda. I mean, if we're gonna talk about... directly comparing Steve Bannon to Goebbels is giving Steve Bannon too much credit.
Yeah.
I'm going to say that right now. But the comparison is still kind of there because I mean it's how Obama won in 2008. It's one of the reasons why Trump had so much media saturation on the internet is because of not only his supporters but also potentially bots and trolls and other global influence factors that are still weird. It's still pretty murky about exactly how much influence online came from legitimate actual Trump supporters and how much of it comes from trolls or bots that post automatically and upvote things automatically in order to weight them up in priority over other things. But either way, the utilization of the most popular media platform for your own propaganda is one of the things that marks marked successful political movements everywhere. The issue with the current one is, well, it's not actually popular. Yeah. Hillary Clinton did win the popular vote in the general election by more than 3 million votes.
Yeah. And actually a lot more if you
factor in cross-check.
Voter suppression.
Yeah, if you factor in voter suppression, Hillary Clinton should have actually won the 2016 election based on the number of votes that were either not counted or suppressed through those actions. But it's still one of those things where you have someone in the president's ear that does have that kind of that knowledge that knowledge that allows them to weaponize media, because that's what that's what propaganda is, one way or another. However you look at it, it's weaponized. It's weaponized media in order to get your point across. Political, ideological battles are still wars. The weapons are just different. Nobody dies. And typically nobody dies as a result of direct conflict between the two. But I'm just kind of falling off. I got nothing.
Oh yeah, I mean. I don't really have too much more to say on that topic.
Steve Bannon is a jerk, and he knows how. Steve Bannon is a jerk, and he knows how the internet works, and that's one of the reasons why. That's one of the reasons why we see some of the media response that we have been seeing, not only about Charlottesville, but really in the last 8 months.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right, I think let's take a little break. Get back. Maybe wrap up on this topic and switch gears. There is that one other story I really wanted to hit on that is not related to Charlottesville, but it's also, given everything that's been going on in the last week between Charlottesville and North Korea, it's really slipped under the radar.
Not only that, it's kind of an old topic, but in terms of just the saturation of Charlottesville coverage, it's a breath of fresh air.
Yeah, so we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. So keep your dial locked. And you're listening to the Hoodrat Strategist radio program only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for political revolution.
WIDR is proud to be supported by Arcadia Ale and the Arcadia Summer Music Festival, located on 701 East Michigan Ave. The Arcadia Music Festival will be taking place June 24th, July 22nd, August 12th, and September 16th. More information can be found at arcadiaale.com/summermusic and widerfm.org.
Alvan Humane Society is a non-for-profit, no-kill animal shelter that has been serving Allegan, Van Buren, and surrounding areas for almost 50 years. They are hosting their CARES Fund Drive and are over halfway to their $500,000 goal. Alvan can currently house around 30 dogs and 100 cats. Money raised from the CARES campaign will go to build a new shelter which will expand this capacity by 20%. Alvan Humane Society has 20 dogs and 40 cats that are microchipped, spayed and neutered, and fully vaccinated, ready for adoption right now. To adopt a pet, donate to the CARES Fund Drive, or find out more, feel free to visit them on the web at www.al-van.org.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo. So before we jump on to the next topic, I did want to read this very powerful post that, this is such a dark topic, and it really hit a lot of people at their emotional core in a lot of ways. But there is a bright side to it, and I wanted to read this post. It's somebody used a pseudonym, which it's pretty cheeky, Snow F Lake, and he or she or they say, yesterday I was approximately 20 feet from the car that hit and killed a young woman in Charlottesville. I ran with the rest of the crowd. The car successfully terrorized us and dispersed the march. But it's important to know something. Amid all the media reports that will focus on the violence, we had won the day. We had driven the Nazis out of town. We had resisted police violence. Different factions of the left were supporting each other. Redneck Revolt, an armed anti-fascist group, was helping nonviolence practicing clergy with security. Union workers, Black Lives Matter, AntiFur, everyone were all marching side by side. The march that was happening before the car incident was celebratory. We took over the streets, thousands of us uniting after a day of resisting white supremacist violence, chanting, "Charlottesville, we got your back." It was the best I've ever felt at a protest ever. Seriously, it felt like victory. I think it's important to know because all the media coverage will focus on the death of our comrade. She deserves that coverage, but you deserve to know her death wasn't in vain. We won, and we will continue fighting in her memory. And I will use the term won because make no mistake, yesterday was a battle, and this is a war. Antifa have been telling Americans for years that ignoring Nazis and white supremacists does not work, that they are set on killing us and will risk their own lives in doing so. Yesterday was proof of that. The car was the only successful act of terrorism perpetrated by the right yesterday, but hundreds of them were armed with semi-automatic weapons, tear gas canisters, and pepper spray. They came to battle. I interviewed a lot of people at yesterday's events, and all had the same feeling that this was the beginning of something bigger. So now it's up to you. Are you going to make a vague statement about how this country is bad and let a martyr's death go unavenged, or are you going to do something about it? And I'll just editorialize a little bit about the do something about it part. We all need to step up and You know, I want everyone listening to this at some point tonight, take a look in the mirror. The resistance is more than just making signs and wearing hats and making phone calls. Sometimes sacrifice is required. So I want you to look in that mirror and really ask yourself, what are you willing to sacrifice? Your time, your money, your safety, your life? Think about it, because one day the resistance might come to your doorstep.
I don't really want to. I feel this need to jump into this quote a lot
please.
right now.
Please do.
But yeah. I'm always hesitant to, because of the gravity that it has for both sides and how it is interpreted by both sides, because both sides obviously think they are right. That's not true, but the Thomas Jefferson quote that the tree of liberty must sometimes be watered with the blood of patriots and tyrants. Guys, that's what we got. That's today.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, like it, as far as the events of Charlottesville go, I mean, that's an example of it. But a declaration of victory, not only a declaration of victory, but also a declaration of unity by left groups, really only highlights the really put a button in it phrase. There aren't many sides. There are two sides: the one with Nazis and the one without Nazis.
And even within that paradigm. Something I would just want to mention, cap this off, is we do still need to remember there is a difference between people who say they support Trump and straight up Nazis. And the Nazis are the people who have been poisoned to such an extent that they're at that point of no return. Not that they can't return. There are, white supremacists who have seen the light and actually do a lot of really important work.
I don't remember
de-radicalizing people.
I don't remember the organization. There's an organization that was bookmarked to receive a large grant from the Obama administration, and it is a group that actively reaches out to people embroiled in hate groups to try to bring them out of it, and it is staffed and run, and all of their actions are done by former members of these hate groups.
Yeah.
So to be clear, not all Trump supporters are Nazis. Not all Trump supporters are racists. Not all Trump supporters are neo-confederalists.
But there is a problem where these lines can. The mother of the murderer, she had no idea that her son had radicalized so much, even though by all factors, he was very vocal about his support of Nazism. So yeah, pay attention, like Nathan Dennison said, and do remember, there's always a lot of space. And as a white person, one of the best things you could do when talking to other white people is, make your focus on helping them understand, because they're almost there. There's a lot of Trump people, they just hate the establishment. But explain to them, how black people, how immigrants, how Muslims have affected your life is absolutely zero compared to how many miseries in your life have been created by old white men in suits. All right, so okay, let's put a pin in that topic for now.
Moving on.
So I wanted to bring this up because it is really important. This is from an article in The Nation. And this is actually based on some investigative findings that they've been floating around in a lot of independent leftist outlets. I kind of wanted to sit on it until one of the more quote-unquote mainstream ones reported on it. But simply because of the gravity of it. I do cover a lot of stories from Mint Press News and websites like that, but given the particular gravity of this, I wanted to wait and see. So on August 9th, this article came out, and it's a new report raises big questions about last year's DNC hack. And I'll try to read a couple of excerpts. yeah.
I'm here for you.
So, we're talking about the context of it. So all this, Russiagate is what we're talking about. All this was set in motion when the DNC's mail server was first violated in the spring of 2016 by subsequent assertions that Russians were behind that quote-unquote hack, and another such operation, also described as a Russian hack, on July 5th. These are the foundation stones of the edifice just outlined. The evolution of public discourse in the years since is worthy of scholarly studies. Possibilities became allegations, and these became probabilities. Then the probabilities turned into certainties, and these evolved into what are now taken to be established truths. By my reckoning, it required a few days to a few weeks to advance from each of these stages to the next. This is accomplished via the indefensibly corrupt manipulations of language repeated incessantly in our leading media. Lost in the year that often appeared to veer into our peculiarly American kind of hysteria is the absence of any credible evidence. And, in our conversations, Luke, and here's something that people need to understand. Russiagate is not a complete nothing burger, but if you're looking at hacks, you're looking in the wrong direction. True. You've seen the media recently realign towards talking about collusion and Trump's ties to Russian oligarchs and agents within the Russian government, which, frankly, that's where it always was all along. Like you can go back to even as far back as the primary, and there were stories about like, hey, I think Trump's got some ties to the Russian mob. I mean, this has been knowledge since way before he ran for president. So that raises a peculiar question. Why is it that the DNC felt it necessary to okay, well, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. Let's talk about like the countering evidence first. But let me get to what the actual experts say. So this is from a group of former NSA and intelligence analysts. They actually came out of the Second Iraq War. They're called Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity, which was founded in 2003. It now has about 30 members. And they kind of formed this group out to discuss with what happened with the whole WMD's lie. And they just thought it was a tremendous failure of the intelligence community, and just very unethical to lead Americans to war under false pretenses. So here is what this group had to say. There was no hack of the Democratic National Committee system on July 5th of last year, not by the Russians and not by anyone else. Hard science now demonstrates it was a leak, a download executed locally with a memory key or a similarly portable data storage device. In short, it was an inside job by someone with access to the DNC system. This cast serious doubt on the initial quote-unquote hack, as alleged, that led to the very consequential publication of a large store of documents on WikiLeaks last summer. Forensic investigations of documents made public 2 weeks prior to the July 5th leak by the person or entity known as Guccifer 2.0 show that they were fraudulent. Before Guccifer posted them, they were adulterated by cutting and pasting them into a blank template that had Russian as its default language. Guccifer took responsibility on June 15th for an intrusion the DNC reported on June 14th and professed to be the WikiLeaks source. Claims essential to the official narrative implicating Russia, in which what was soon cast as an extensive hacking operation. To put the point simply, forensic science now devastates this narrative. So he goes on to ask, it really throws a lot of this into doubt. And, he talks about, giving it some historical context. Our intelligence agencies have lied to us before. And also brings about, the DNC never let the FBI look at their servers. It was an independent contractor, CrowdStrike, which actually has a lot of financial ties to the Democratic Party, that made the conclusions about Russian hacking. So okay, sorry. Going on, and I'm trying to find where we get into a little bit more specific. So the actual context of it, or not context of it, but what proves that the hard science behind it that proves this assertion. So they talk about Forensicator, who is one of the analysts, and a lot CIA people, these intelligence types, they do use pseudonyms a lot. It's just kind of best practices. This is the hard science around it. They made a paper dated July 9th, and the volume of the supposedly hacked material and what is called the transfer rate, the time a remote hack would require. The metadata established several facts in this regard with granular precision. On the evening of July 5th, 2016, 1,976 megabytes of data were downloaded from the DNC server. The operation took 87 seconds. This yields a transfer rate of 22.7 megabits per second. Megabytes. Sorry.
Megabits are a different thing.
Yeah, my bad. The statistics are matters of record and essential to disproving the hack theory. No internet service provider, such as a hacker, would have had to use this in mid-2016, was capable of downloading data at this speed. Compounding this contradiction, Guccifer claimed to have run this hack from Romania, which, for numerous reasons technically called delivery overheads, would slow down the speed of a hack even further from maximum achievable speed.
I just kind of want to dip in here for a quick second.
Oh, please do. Yeah.
I kind of like how the fact that America's terrible internet speeds kind of helped prove that this was a leak and not a hack. Because, guys, we totally could have 22.7 megabytes per second down, 22.7 megabytes down a second. You know, if we just put money into our information infrastructure. But I mean, I just find that a little amusing, you know, just kind of a little quip.
Yeah, well, it's funny too because like the highest speed that he was able to, and the investigators were able to achieve under optimal circumstances was 15.6 megabytes per second. On average, it was 11.8. So like there's just no possible conditions under which 22.7 was possible. And that's like internally, not even talking about like transferring across.
Unless that data is like getting into like DeLoreans and just taking off, man.
Yeah,
like,
and here's where the investigators, they sink the hoop in the basket. Here's where it is. Further, local copy speeds are measured, demonstrating that 23 megabytes per second is a typical transfer rate when using a USB 2 flash device, a thumb drive. Boom! There goes
the Russian hacker narrative.
That's the thing, though.
That's a narrative destroyed.
Okay, if you're on the internet and you follow a lot of people on the alt left, I'm not gonna use that again.
You please, let's not use it ironically.
People who progressive leftists talk a lot about on the internet about some of them talk about the Russiagate narrative being false, but the problem with that is, and the media did this, I'm pretty sure in a very deliberative fashion, where they moved the goalposts. So, yes, it's true now. We see that it wasn't a Russian hack with a DNC, which was the original premise that got this whole Russiagate thing snowballing. But under their new rubrics, which is Trump's connections with Russia and the Russian mob and Russian oligarchs, Russiagate is true under that metric, but it was started under false pretenses. So,
I mean, it really didn't have to be. All you really have to do is start looking at how Trump violates the emoluments clause, and you can go from there.
Ding, 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 ding. Yes.
I mean, they're doing a lot of unnecessary work over here.
Yes. Yeah, no, seriously. And I mean, obviously what it goes back to, and you know, what people were saying, you know, like a lot of the burners and the progressives right after they started blaming Russia was some incredulousness that they were just trying to defer the blame and distract from the actual content of the emails. And I think in a strong, powerful way, that's really been borne out.
I mean,
in this investigation. Yeah,
it succeeded. If casting a leak as a hack allows you to paint the information that was it allows you some room to cast the information that does get out as false through whatever reasons might happen. The article mentions that that a number of the files that Guccifer posted were false, run through regular copy paste through templates, and that's what makes them unverifiable. It makes them false. It makes them forged. Well, if they're forged, if those documents are forged in order to, or were manipulated in a way to show that they were obtained through Russia somehow, I mean, it discredits the Russian hack theory, but it does not discredit the fact that the DNC was conspiring against the Bernie Sanders campaign.
Well, yeah, and going back to that, don't bring a false assertion in there about because I've heard some people, not very many people, a couple of very vocal people, talking about how
very vocal
the WikiLeaks are fake, or that there's forgeries in there. In the context of this, when they're talking about forgery, they're talking about the stuff that Guccifer put out, which was the WikiLeaks documents with this added kind of national stamp of Russia on it. And the actual stuff released by WikiLeaks comes from the actual source, which, again, we don't know who the actual source is. And again, who knows? Maybe we will find out one day that, it was a DNC employee, Ivan Drago, plugged in a flash drive. I don't know if I'll bring.
I mean,
up
if it's an actual spy, then we're living in a James Bond movie. So.
Yeah. And there's also a lot of people who think it was a whistleblower. I'm not gonna tread into the whole Seth Rich thing right now, but that's a theory that's been out there, and it's again, I don't think that's a story I'm gonna touch until there's something more solid on it. I don't really want to. Not that it's in fully as much of a conspiracy theory as people say it is, because look at American history. There's been politically motivated assassinations all over the place. So to think that's completely out of the question or crazy is a little naive. But that is something to think about where it comes from. And really, it would be very helpful to figure out who actually did this and what their motivations were, so that there could be some closure. And it might deter us from. Noam Chomsky's talked about this, how kind of mad it is, as in terms of madness, that, the one decent thing about Trump's platform, which is to say having good relations with a nuclear superpower. This is not to say that the Russian government is good or that Vladimir Putin is a good person. It's just to say the unequivocally true statement that having good relations with the second largest nuclear superpower is a good thing. To keep prodding for those relations to be bad, and there's a American Russian policy experts who say our relations are worse than they've been since the Cold War, almost since the Cuban Missile Crisis. But so that's why it's really important to get to the bottom of that whole hacking thing, so we can really understand you got to separate Trump. Because as long as they're pushing this narrative that Russian spies or the Russian government infiltrated our elections, it's going to be used by the media and by the Democrats to keep beating the drums of war with Russians, with the Russia. which is a terrible idea. Just like the worst idea in the long, sad history of bad ideas, to quote Dr. Ian Malcolm. So I don't know. Luke, do you got some stuff to spit about it?
I think that it's funny that after this article published on The Nation, the DNC contacted The Nation to decry them as perpetuating conspiracy theories just as bad as the ones perpetuated by the Trump campaign. I'm going to sit here and go, man, I don't know if you got people running literal scientific tests on this data, and its size, its amount, its type.
Wait, are you saying
I'm saying
that the DNC is making an assertion without backing it up with any evidence?
Yes.
Can't believe they would do that.
Me neither.
Yeah.
That's totally out of character for them, right?
Yeah.
But in all seriousness, like, either it's a nothing burger or there's something there. Sort of one or the other. And we can't really call it a nothing burger until there is legitimate, like 100% nothing happened. Just like we can't say something happened when we don't have evidence that it happened. However, when we're taking a look, when we're staring down the face of hard scientific data, and like raw, hard, scientific data, raw, hard scientific data, you can't. It's hard to construct a narrative that runs counter to that data when it proves the antithesis of the narrative that you created.
Yeah,
like this is some heliocentric versus geocentric solar system type deal here.
Like, I'm sorry, at this point the Democrats are basically saying the Earth is flat. It's not.
It's like, no, the Earth is round. You can figure it out with math.
And, like, let's even go back to, like, let's talk about how this goes into, like, fake news and all that. The reason Trump has so much ammunition when he calls CNN fake news is because they've reported on stuff like, the DNC hack without any evidence. And a lot of people on the right, I mean, like we talked about earlier, they go on the internet a lot. And a lot of right-wing websites, and even a lot of there's like right-wing websites, leftist websites, and really investigative and skeptical websites like The Intercept that truly are kind of nonpartisan. And they go to all those websites too, and it develops this narrative inside. It's like, yeah, Trump is right. It's all this fake news. And one of the reasons Hitler came into power is he was able to discredit the media. And when the media does stuff like this, when the DNC discredits hard science, they're doing Trump's job for them.
Yeah.
By they are illegitimizing themselves.
Kind of to put my thoughts and feelings, wrap it up with a bow here, because we can't walk away from the atmosphere of Nazism that now exists. Like, it's blatant, it's out there. We have to address it. We have to recognize that it exists, that it's real. I can't. Lost my train of thought. This to kind of wrap it up in a bow. If you're in Berlin, I recommend always visiting the Holocaust Museum in Berlin. And it's not just a Holocaust museum. It is a museum that logs the history of the Nazi Party's rise to power. And I'm honestly and truly terrified of what is happening, because everything that is happening, if we do not change our response to it, we're going to get a repeat of 1930s Germany. We see it in the tacit, complicit responses of, well, we oppose the violence, hatred, and bigotry on many sides, when we have our political organizations coming out against hard data. And honestly, if the DNC wants to come out against that hard data, then I need to see a counter report with different data that can be repeated.
That can be repeated.
Exactly.
That's the key there.
I would love to see this test be repeated by a different source, and I would love to see it challenged. And if it holds out, it holds out. But if the DNC wants to just straight up call it a conspiracy theory, they've got to back it up with their own data. This is data. This is hard
Not lore, it's data.
Yeah, it's not lore, it's data. It's stats don't lie. Numbers don't lie. Mm-hmm. Raw numbers do not lie.
No, and yeah, I guess we'll put a pin on that. You can find all the articles on our website, or Facebook page, that is. Shout out to all the people who made it out to the rally on Sunday, all the speakers, especially Shannon and Nathan. You guys really you brought it home and said exactly what needed to be said. I want to thank y'all for tuning in. This has been the Hoodrat Strategist radio program. Actually, let me take a few more seconds just to tell y'all about some of the events coming up this weekend. In the activist community. On Saturday, August 19th, there's the Cosecha Circle. That's going to be at the Kalamazoo First Congregational UCC. That is at 10 a.m. Cosecha is an organization that helps fight for the rights of undocumented immigrants. Also that day is at the Kalamazoo College Arcus Center for Social Justice Leadership. This is Saturday, August 19th at 6 p.m. It's the Project X end of year celebration. Project X, they help, they do these leadership programs, like these intense 9-month programs for community organizers and activists, younger in age. So come out if you want, check out, see what they're doing. And also on Sunday, August 20th, 69 Davis Street, there's going to be a bake sale fundraiser that is going to, they're going to be selling baked goods, and the money will be donated to organizations like Erase and the NAACP. And that is going to be from noon to 5 o'clock. And on Monday, there's this is really important. We've talked about the Excellence Foundation a lot on the show. There's going to be the final vote for the Excellence Foundation is on Monday, 7 o'clock at the City Commission. We talked about the potential conflicts of interest. One of the primary donors to this foundation is former chair of Rick Snyder's Political Action Committee, former board member of Monsanto, and they are essentially going to be bankrolling the city's budget. In a nutshell, there's been some progress made on making it accountable and transparent, but there's still a long way to go. 7 o'clock, make your voice heard, and there'll also be a rally outside at 6. So, let's wrap it up. This has been the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo. Thank you all for tuning in, and keep fighting for that revolution solution.